What do you do when your child ignores dishes on the sink? They see it, they know it's there, and maybe you're busy with other things and they completely ignore it. Do you ignore the fact that they ignore it? Do you punish them? Do you lay down the law? Do you just say, well, it's not really a big deal. It's just dishes. My name is January Donovan. I'm the founder of the Women's School, where we teach women human formation, which basically means we train them with a mindset and the skills necessary to flourish in every arena. I'm also a mom of 8, built a business. So this topic is very important to me because what good is building a business if I have not done my job to train my children with the necessary skills really to achieve a flourishing life? So we're going to dive into something that seems so basic, so simple, but is it really? And why is it that the world has become so complicated and is so complicated that we think doing the dishes has become sort of this daunting task? You see images of mothers who are kind of overwhelmed and there's piles of dishes and it feels like laundry is, taking over them, and this idea that our homes seem to feel like it's in disarray because it's so hard to be a mother because all of the dishes and the laundry and the cleanup and the kids, and it becomes this sort of compounding impact of why motherhood has become so hard. And to be honest, one of it is maybe we just don't really know kitchen skills. So why is this important? Number one, if we don't have foundational skill training on cleaning our kitchen, being proactive, and keeping order in that one space in the room, and we don't train our children to do it, then how are they going to be healthy one day? This is how I teach, this is what's happened in my house. So I was coming home and I had a long day. I was filming. And I have 8 children. And so my children, they take turns taking care of the little children. And I think it's a very important contribution. And they know it's their contribution because that helps them work their schedule around the fact that in this house we contribute. And part of the contribution is that when mom and dad has to work, they watch the littles. And that's what my older children, I have a 17 is my oldest and 4-year-old is my youngest. And so what they do throughout the week is that they divvy up their time. And I say, you figure it out. You are responsible. And so you figure out when you are contributing and what times, and these are the hours that I'll be working. And so I was working, I was filming, and I came home, and my expectation, which everybody knows in my house, which they, I expect of them, is that the kitchen is clean. Right, the kitchen, the expectations that I have in my house is that we don't put dishes in a sink and let it pile up. We clean right immediately after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner. You don't wait till the end to have dirty dishes because then it feels overwhelming because it's compounded. And then all of a sudden you're making something, right? You're cooking lunch, and then it feels it's so much that's going on, and then all of a sudden it's like it just looks messy. And so that's what works for my house. That doesn't mean that has to be the way it is in your house, but it's what works for my house to keep order and discipline. And so one day, it was yesterday actually, that I come home. I had a long day because of filming, and I come home and there were dishes in the sink piled up, and the kitchen was not clean. And, it wasn't super dirty or messy, but it's not your standard of clean. And so I ask my children, I'm trying to keep them anonymous, and say, well, what happened? And says, well, we were watching the littles, and my littles are 4 and 5. Those are my 2 youngest, and 8 and 10. So you don't necessarily have to keep an eye on them. And then I learned that they were watching a movie. And so I thought, so you're telling me that you watched a movie prior to maybe taking ownership and responsibility of the dishes that you used for lunch, and you went ahead and did leisure prior to cleaning up. And they're like, yeah, kind of did, Mom. And so what I did was they were both out when I came home. They were out with their friends, and I texted them and I said immediately, you girls need to both come home. And I'm notorious in my house of taking pictures of things that I feel like need clarity, because then you can't hide behind images. And so I took a picture and said, this is a non-negotiable standard. You know that before you leave the house, the kitchen must be clean. And that is the expectation I have of you. That's a non-negotiable expectation. And so I was very firm and fierce about it. And so I said, no, Mom, those were not my dishes. I said, I don't just make food for myself. I make food for the family. You just don't do the dishes you use. You clean the kitchen. But more importantly, it's you were watching a movie. And so, you say come home. And so I sit them down and they know that they know when they know when I am serious about things and it's non-negotiable things. And one of these things that I think is really important in my own home is that we do things well in the micro things, and that's how we do things well in the macro things. And so cleaning the kitchen is important in our family because if we are going to be healthy, then we have to know how to clean the kitchen fast, and that we have to know how to do it well. And it cannot be a hard thing. It cannot be difficult. And my script in my family is like, if dishes are hard, then life is going to be very hard because there's a lot harder things in life than dirty dishes. And so I need you to own this skill now, master it, time yourself, and make sure that you're efficient and effective in doing the dishes so that you one day, when you're on your own, will know how to cook a healthy meal and not be a victim to fast food because you don't know how to cook. More importantly, because you know how to clean a kitchen. And so they understand this language. I'm very serious about the need to keep order in our kitchen or just keep order in the house in general. But primarily the kitchen because it's always sort of used, right? And so I sit down and it's interesting because I have two girls and one of the girls was pushing back and one of the girls was taking ownership. And it was very simple to me. And I said, if I tolerate you not having order and allowing you to pile the dishes as though it's not a big deal, I am preparing you to struggle when you become a mom someday or you become a single woman and you come home because you're not going to build the right habit to clean up immediately. We clean up right away. And that letting that pile up, right? Knowing you are watching a movie tells me that you are not taking responsibility for the things that you should be taking responsibility, and you're already have all these freedom without responsibility. And so it's something that they logically can say, yeah, it's actually true. Like I should have done it, and said, well, why didn't you do it? Well, excuses. And to me, it better be a really good excuse. And, I am tough with my children and tough in a way that I think love is the will to go to the other. And I can't be soft on things that I know are going to rob them of opportunities in the future. Like if I always tell them, I said, if you don't do your job well, I'm going to fire you. And it's the same thing in this house. So you have to learn some of the most basic foundational skills of not just doing the dishes, but to do it well. Otherwise, I'm preparing you to be fired someday in your future job. And so they understand that very logically. And so I sat them down and I basically said, somehow you're going to have to figure out a new strategy where before you leave the house, you carve out 10 minutes so that you do a pit stop at the kitchen every single time you go somewhere, so that you check if it's clean, and if it needs to be clean, then you wash the dishes and do it fast. It's not a big deal. And you clean up right away and then you leave. Why? Because that's what's necessary someday when you become a mom. Now, I have built $1 million business, a multi-million-dollar business, but that doesn't mean I'm free from doing the dishes. That doesn't mean that I should now not learn the skill because I'm going to build a business, regardless if you're the president of the world or not the world, president of America, or you're a CEO, or you're in business, or you're making lots of money. It doesn't mean that I should rob you of the most basic foundational necessary skills and habits so that you can actually become more confident because you are competent. And so it is, it's so important that I believe, give our children responsibilities, that we don't sugarcoat things that will eventually rob them, such as, okay, honey, it's not really a big deal. Well, a lot of little big deals become no little big deals. It becomes a big deal when we don't nip it in the bud. And so I think, have an obligation to really be fierce about microdiscipline that leads to macrodiscipline. And it was interesting because one of my child, like I said, was saying, Mom, I own up to it. I realized I should have not done that. I'm going to make sure that before I leave, I do the dishes. And I told them, as a woman, this is very important. Now, I'm not suggesting that men don't do the dishes, because my dad and Ryan does. I'm suggesting I want you to own that skill as part of a way to nurture, not this idea that men can do this and women can do that. As a woman, I need to train you to be masterful in household chores. Why? Because you need to have a clean and ordered home. Not that your spouse can help. Like Ryan is so helpful in my house. It's so helpful. He does so much, but that doesn't mean that I should not learn how to do it. Right. And the other child was pushing back, and I said, well, it looks a lot like you need emotional command. And she was upset about it. She's like, well, I did this. I said, if I just excuse you, then what does that say about your capacity to raise a standard in your own life? Because there's one child of mine who's notorious for cooking and then leaving the dishes there. And she's really good. She actually does, the dishes, and we've been working on it. But she really doesn't like to. I said, I don't need you to love the dishes. I just need you to love the finished product of having, a clean kitchen. And so you're going to have to find a way to do things you don't love for the sake of what is necessary. And so anyway, she ended up doing the dishes, which took 10 minutes. I mean, literally, I was timing her. In my house, we time ourselves in doing certain tasks to see how we could beat our own time, because that helps us to be more efficient and effective, which is part of strategy. And I said, why don't you just sort of think about this, right then and there? And she's like, well, I didn't really think about it, which in my house, it's also not a really good thing to respond. I didn't really think about it. Why? Because we need to start thinking about things, and we need to start really paying attention to the things that we're thinking about, the things that we're doing, because we can't be a victim to things that we're not processing. And why do I share this whole dish sort of, experience? Because I think that we are in danger of raising very entitled children when we don't hold to a high standard in those micro disciplines in our culture. And what happens is that college campuses today have beds that are not made, and children don't know how to take ownership in their health. That there is this idea that being healthy is simply exercising and eating well, and it has nothing to do with creating a systematic way to cook a healthy meal. That is a disconnect. If we are going to raise a standard of our health crisis in our culture, mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually, then we have to own our kitchen and to do things efficiently that's going to give us better fighting chance to make a healthy meal. Then making a healthy meal is not a big deal. But secondly, as women, I believe, are nurturers of humanity. And we know that because biologically, we have the capacity to nurture a child to what exists. I mean, not to existence because that's God, but to, from this little tiny, what is it called? Cell all the way up to becoming this immortal human being. And that happens in this first 10 months in our womb. And that's a profound awareness of the way our bodies are made, but also our physical body reflects our spiritual call. And so the idea of nurturing people through food, through serving them, is such a part of being a woman. We can't rob ourselves that. And so the idea of doing the dishes is part of us learning to nurture other people around us, cooking a healthy meal. I'm not saying be a chef. I'm saying we want to cook a healthy meal for our friends someday, for our family someday, and for ourselves. And if we don't hound on these skills now because mothers are way too soft on the importance of doing the dishes or those micro disciplines, then we could just tolerate a lesser version of our children. And I think sometimes, well, maybe a lot more times, it's simply because mothers too don't raise that standard for themselves. And I'm not, suggesting that, there's no things don't come up and you don't have things that are messy. Of course it does. What I'm suggesting is that we as mothers need to model micro-disciplined habits and keep the standard in our own home so that they get to see how we do things. But secondly, we also need to raise the bar of standards for them. We also need to be like, you know what? This is my expectation of myself, is a clean kitchen, and that is what I expect of you. And I need to hold you to it, because we could be masterful in the kitchen and cleaning, being efficient, but that doesn't mean that we help them develop that skill. Because remember, it's competence leads to confidence. That's what we teach in the woman's school. But the more skill you learn, the more confident you become. Who doesn't want a confident children? Who doesn't want to be confident as a woman? But we talk about confidence without discipline, without the need for repetition, the mundane, the persistence of developing skill after skill after skill. And so it's sort of this disconnect that we talk about in our culture, but confidence can only come from competence, which is to suffer the agony of skill after skill to achieve the good that you desire, which is maybe to be efficient in the kitchen, maybe to be kind, maybe to be effective communicator. You've got to learn this skill and make this repetitive, which means you realize, I really need to be better at kitchen, and these are the things that I need, and you know that to be true and good, but then you have to incarnate the good that you know, so that knowing then eventually becomes being. And that's what you want. I am a woman who's efficient in the kitchen. I'm a woman that's kind. I am a woman who knows how to hold my children accountable. And so what we want to do is develop these microdisciplines as women so that we don't fall into the trap of becoming a victim to things that we feel like they're not in our control, but they are, such as ordering our home, such as our children, not their choices, but the ability to control and create order in our home is within our grasp. There's always things we can't control because ultimately God is in control. But there are things that we can control. Our capacity to develop our mindset, our capacity to do things well, our capacity to pay attention to the needs. These are the things that are within our control, our capacity to communicate effectively. The more we develop the skill after skill, the more we can communicate to our children how to raise their own standard. And so I share this dish dilemma with you because I think that there's all the wisdom of developing and helping us and our children develop and our families develop in those micro moments where we raise the standard for our children and help them do the dishes and do it well and don't cut them a slack and don't let them think it's a big deal. It's just dishes. It's quick, it's easy, and it's fun. And we shift our mindset around it and it's necessary. And in life, we have to do things that we don't want to do at the highest level because that's what winners do. That's what we say in our house. And it's not about what you like, what you don't like. It's about what's necessary. In life, there's always going to be things we like to do and there's going to be things that we don't like to do, but there's things that we ought to do to help us flourish. And part of that is actually just doing the dishes and doing it well. So I hope that you have learned. If this episode resonates with you, you can subscribe to our channel. And if you want to learn more about what we do in the Women's School, you can join our school and become a student of the New Woman Masterclass, where we teach women hundreds of skills to flourish as a woman. Or if you feel called to mentor women or coach women, join our mentor and community group and learn how you can build a community of women that's growing and studying together. Thank you so much. I look forward to continuing to offer you training that is practical, that is integrated, and that is rooted in objective truth.